Pausa rapidinho agora para falar de dica de ouro para os papais e mamães. Depois de experimentar a nova Hug Supreme Care Fralda Roupinha, tudo ficou ainda melhor pro meu filho. É a única com canais em X que se adaptam aos movimentos, com 2 vezes proteção noturna e cintura elástica que se adapta ao corpinho do bebê, além de ser super fácil de colocar e tirar. Praticidade pura. Então guarda essa dica. Nova Hug Supreme Care Fralda Roupinha. Bebê, estamos juntos nessa, mais do que nunca. Agora curta seu podcast.
Hail, you heroes, hawks, heralds, crows, pirates, and wardens. Welcome to the Dragon Age Lorecast, where we unpack, discuss, and galaxy brain about all the lore behind the Dragon Age series.
We are so excited to bring you this podcast. Every episode, we'll be talking about a different topic in the Dragon Age universe, from character deep dives to exalted marches and elven gods. We will cover it all.
There will be spoilers. And always remember, swooping is bad.
Hello and welcome to the Dragon Age Lorecast, where we talk about Dragon Age and its lore. I am one of your hosts, Austin, also known as Teacup.
And I'm your other host, Shelby or Shecup.
And we are here to continue our book, novels, media, whatever series. And today we are talking about the various number of short stories that exist for the Dragon Age universe.
Yes, we have quite a few. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 from Dragon Age 2, 2, 3, we'll go with 3 from Dragon Age Inquisition. And then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 that we can kind of name as Veilguard stories, or at least post-Inquisition stories. Now we're going to Actually, it's been a long time since we have done like a true lore book media literature episode. Like, it's been a while. So as a reminder, typically in these episodes, we go through the plot and the characters of each piece of literature. And then at the end, we talk about any lore inconsistencies, plot lines we liked or didn't like, etc. And then at the very, very end, we give kind of a rating to all of this, to the piece of literature. But since we have, almost 20 of these, that would be a little bit repetitive. So what we're going to do instead is, I think that we can just kind of give a rating at the end of each kind of bunching of them. So all of the Dragon Age 2 will kind of go together. Even though they have different writers, they really all thematically go together.
Well, are you ready to just get started?
Yeah, let's do it. So we're going to go in chronological order, and we're going to do the Dragon Age 2 ones first. So we're going in, I think, alphabetical order of these, not prioritizing or giving preference to anyone or over the other. But that means first up is Anders by Jennifer Hepler, which I know is going to make Austin annoyed, but it is what it is. We're going with Anders first. So my kind of description of this short story is, it really does describe how Anders and Justice became fused together and the consequences of that act. He wakes up pretty shortly into the short story, and he is surrounded by a group of Grey Wardens and a former Templar turned Grey Warden named Roland. And Roland is kind of like the appeasement that the Circle needed to allow Anders to stay with the Grey Wardens, because he's kind of Anders's personal Templar, which he hates, of course. And ultimately, when he and Justice fuse, he kills Roland. And so not only does he kill Roland, but he kills all of these Grey Wardens, and then he flees at the end of the short story. And we presume that he flees to Kirkwall. Do you have thoughts about this one?
just really, because we did talk about this one in his character deep dive, and I will notice that like a lot of these short stories we do cover in various character deep dives. So if you want more information, you can go to there. But the one thing that my takeaway from this is that Anders knew from the very beginning how corrupted justice was. And I think he knew from the very beginning how little control that he had of himself. And I think that is telling on his own denial when we meet him in Kirkwall, of just how much in denial he is about what he actually is, which is an abomination.
Yes, I completely agree with that. And also on a funny note, this short story confirms that Anders is a cannibal, which I know we also discussed on his character deep dive, but I feel the need to bring it up here too. The specific quote is, it's after he wakes up, fused with justice, and it says he's fighting with Roland. And it says, then his sword is level with my chest, and I let it come because it's only steel and cannot hurt me, for I am not of mortal men. And when it sinks hilt deep in my flesh with no reaction, that's when he gives up. He turns and runs, and from behind, I tear his head off at the neck. No magic, just me, whatever that is now. His blood splashes into my open mouth, and it tastes like honeyed wine, and the warmth spreads through me. So, Anders is a cannibal. You heard it here, folks.
Mm-hmm. I don't have much more to say about this one.
All right, well then let's go to Aveline, which I think this one might be my favorite of all of the Dragon Age 2 short stories. So in this one was written by Lukas Kristjanson, and in it, Aveline is a recruit who is stationed somewhere in the Dales in kind of a rural area, not close to a big city, when a squire, a knight's apprentice, basically, came running to tell them about a group of Templars who are in trouble. And I think Aveline is kind of the only one who goes to help, because it's kind of like, well, there's no way they're going to survive this long, and it's really far. And it appears to me, reading in between the lines, that other people make excuses, but Aveline goes. She goes to help, and the Templar who needs rescuing is none other than Wesley, who, as we know from Dragon Age 2, is her future husband and, of course, a Templar. Along the way, they fight Darkspawn and demons, and later on, at the end of the story, Aveline tells her father about Wesley, and he encourages her to marry him and to take his name. And that's kind of setting up Aveline's story for Dragon Age 2. Mm-hmm. Do you have thoughts on this one?
This is one of my favorite stories, I think. It's very sad in reading it after playing Dragon Age 2. All of these stories in Dragon Age 2 are about basically little snippets of how the companions get to where they are in Kirkwall. But this one, I liked Aveline's point of view. I liked her relationship with her father. All in all, real good story.
I agree. And I think this one does really excellent character building, because we know in 2, when Leandra dies and Hawke is talking to Aveline, there's a cutscene or a moment conversation they have. That's one of my favorite conversations in the game, where Aveline is basically like, nobody gets to tell you how to process your grief, essentially. And no one else, in my opinion, in that game is more qualified to have that conversation with Hawke than Aveline, because she's lost a lot of people. You know, she lost Wesley, her first husband, and she lost her dad too. And so it makes this story gives light to that, even though, you know, Aveline does tell some stories about her father in the game. But I just feel like this gives her character a little bit more depth, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, and it comes down to the depth of like understanding that like the reason she can have that conversation with Hawke is because Hawke and Aveline are bonded, you know, trauma bonding, but just a thing, they're bonded through, they both shared moments of grief with each other at the same time, because Bethany or Carver and Wesley die at the same time within minutes of each other.
That's absolutely true. So the next one is Fenris, and this was written by David Gaider. And in this short story, Fenris is being pursued by Teventer soldiers, and at the beginning, he's on the run. He's stayed in one place too long, and he acknowledges, yeah, I've stayed here too long. They're gonna catch up with me soon, and they do. Fenris pretty quickly kills most of them and escapes the rest by diving in through a window into a kitchen. He terrifies the poor woman who's cooking there. But ultimately he takes a loaf of bread to eat and skedaddles right on out, or at least tries to. But two of the hunters catch up with him and he attacks them too.
I'm going to be honest with you that surprise for everyone, but this was not one of my favorites. And I think that it's mainly because it's a lot of David Gaider prose, and I'm not the biggest fan of David Gaider prose.
I would agree with you. I think that this is one of the weaker ones. And the reason for me that it's one of the weaker ones is because we don't get much of anything that we don't already know about him. I think all of the other ones, maybe Isabela is the other one that we already know. But I feel like everyone else, we get information about them that adds something to their character. And Fenris is it's the same old stuff. It's everything that he deals with in Dragon Age 2. So I would have been more interested to see something maybe he was getting flashbacks during this or something like that. Would have made it a little bit more interesting to me.
Or maybe even just seeing something of Fenris's wittier side of him out, not just on the run using brute force to overpower these people, and him who eventually becomes the Blue Wraith, this mass murderer and avenger of slaves. But why couldn't we get something about to show how clever he is, even to the point of clever enough to set a trap to trick Hawk into killing Teventer Magisters for him, or other things like that.
Yeah. I think it could have been. We could have learned more about Fenris for sure in this one, but it wasn't written badly, I wouldn't say.
No.
Okay, so the next one is Isabela, and this was written by Sheryl Chee. And in it, Isabela walks into the Hanged Man. She's got a handful of coin and she's looking to get drunk, obviously, as one is wont to do in the Hanged Man. While this is happening, while she's getting drunk, a sailor touches her on her lower back. And so in response, she grabs his arm, threatens him, and breaks his fingers as a warning. Then she meets a man named Lucky who claims to know everything there is about Kirkwall, and Isabela then enlists him to help her find, quote unquote, an item, which we obviously can kind of pick up on is the Tome of Coslin.
This one was fine. Again, like you said, it's up there in the things of we didn't really learn anything that we didn't already know from playing the game. It just shows that by the time Isabela asks for Hawk's help, she's already tried several times to track down this item.
Yeah, it does very much paint the picture of Isabela is desperate, which she is. She absolutely is, but I don't think we fully grasp how desperate she is at the beginning of the game. Personally, at least I did not.
Yeah, I would agree with that sentiment.
So the next one is Merrill, and this one is written by Mary Kirby, and I really enjoyed this one. This one is basically Merrill and the Keeper are together for the whole time, and they're walking into a cave in Sundermount. It's lonely, creepy, very spooky. Merrill is hearing a voice in her dreams, but as they continue on into the cave, she hears the voice more clearly. They then find some kind of ruins, maybe Teventer, and a demon is trapped inside of a statue that has been there since before the fall of Arlathan. He promises to give them knowledge of everything that it's seen if only they will release it. Keeper Minrathous is basically no, we're leaving. Come on, let's go. And that's the end.
Yeah, so I enjoyed this one just because I enjoyed the glimpse into the Keeper and Merrill's relationship before, in the in-between in between Origins and 2. But one thing that I found really interesting is that they ask 3 times for the demon's name. And so that's always significant storytelling when something happens when you ask 3 times. But I don't think we've ever gotten... Obviously, this demon is the one that eventually could potentially be the clan and Merrill's undoing, depending on your choices and how you handle the situation. But I don't think we've ever gotten the demon's name except for in this short story, which is a demon of audacity, which I think is really interesting from a lore perspective and from Merrill's character, because I think a lot of times demons in Dragon Age serve to highlight a character's fatal flaw. And I think that arrogance and audacity is one of Merrill's fatal flaws. Like, why does it have to be her? Why is she so arrogant that she is the only one who can bring back the Dalish information, or that this is the only way to uncover this information is to consort with demons, and that her way, she is so certain and so arrogant that her way of doing this is the only way that it can get accomplished.
Yeah. That's a fantastic point. And I do feel like audacity is a subset of pride. I feel like the two of them go hand in hand, and you can't really separate that. So I feel like this is a pride demon, and that's its name. But I absolutely agree with everything you've said, and I think that's a great point. And I think this is another reason why I'm like, Merrill and Solus, they could be besties. Like, she absolutely could be one of his agents. But that's another episode. So let's move on to the next one, which is Sebastian, which I'm sure when you listeners hear that, you're probably groaning audibly or maybe internally. And I was too when I came to this one, but I will have you know, this one is probably my second favorite after Aveline's, which I was shocked by, just truly shocked to enjoy this one as much as I did. So let's get into the summary. Sebastian's parents, they send him to the Chantry as a punishment for him basically being a wild party boy. And he hates his life. He's just basically drudging through everything when a woman sends him a note to help him escape. He basically is like, okay, well, let me take this woman up on her offer. And he starts praying to Andraste to help get him out of religious service. And he's like, oh, maybe this is ironic and I shouldn't do this. And oh, well, I'll do it anyway. And so ultimately he actually does. He promises to serve Andraste later in life in whatever way she requests, if only he doesn't have to give up his life now. And so he also vows to kill no one in order to gain his freedom. And so he escapes. The unnamed woman in the note has like left some supplies for him. And in the process of escaping, he runs into Grand Cleric Elthina amidst a group of Templars. She reveals that she's the one who sent the note. She then gives him the bag of gold that the Veils gave the Chantry for taking Sebastian in the first place. And she tells him that he can go free. There's some conversation here, but essentially, like, you don't have to stay here anymore. As an explanation, she says, quote, no one should ever enter the Chantry through the back door, she says. The only one who can make this commitment is you, Sebastian. The front door will always be open. And so as his response, he leaves and then he walks back into the Chantry through the front door. And so the kind of meaning behind this is like, no one should be forced to be here. Nobody should be sent away ashamed and embarrassed to be reformed by the Chantry. Those who come to the Chantry should come in earnest with an open heart, because that's the true purpose, not to be forced to be here. And Sebastian takes this to heart and he goes back. And then that, of course, sets him up perfectly for his extreme piety in Dragon Age 2.
For this one, I kind of do agree with you that I enjoyed reading this one. It made Sebastian a little more believable for me, because without this story, you just think of him as like, oh, son of like this family. His family was murdered and he's super religious. and he's religious because he's always been raised religious. But no, it's like there's an actual reason of the chantry was there for him when no one else was. And that's why he is so pious and so committed to his vows. And I just think that it makes him less of a ick for me.
Yeah, I think that's fair, but I also feel like it does make his plot line a little bit nonsensical, because if he is so pious because of his family sending, or because of his experience with Grand Cleric Althena, and is like mad almost at his family for sending him there, why is he so determined to avenge them, you know? But I also can understand like you being mad at your family but still wanting to be in relationship with them. So I guess I've answered my own question there.
Yeah.
But the last one for Dragon Age 2 is, of course, Varric, written by Mary Kirby. And so in this one, Varric is in the Hanged Man, and he's playing cards with an elf named Gallard and Thrask, the Templar, who we meet in the game. A Merchants Guild servant appears asking for Varric, and everyone in the bar says, never heard of him. This happens repeatedly, several times, while the group continues their round of cards, and nobody ever tells the truth about who Varric is, even though he's sitting right there. And at the end, Varric wins several gold off of Sir Thrask.
I think the story is fine and it's well written. I feel like it doesn't fit with the other character introduction stories. Like, we learn about that Bartrand is going to the Deep Roads, which we knew already. We learn that Varric likes his story, and he has a weird relationship with the Hangman where everyone protects him there. But other than that, like, there's not a lot of like Varric's internal, like his relationships with other people, other than like that he had a pre-existing relationship with Thrask, which makes sense why he sends Hawk all of this information about quests for Thrask.
Yeah, I mean, I get that, but I do still feel like it gives us more information about, like, he's clearly been at the Hanged Man for a long time. Like, clearly he's been around Kirkwall for a while, which I never made that assumption. I kind of always assumed, like, oh, Varric's newer to Kirkwall, but he loves the city and has chosen it for his new home. But this kind of makes the argument that, like, no, he's been here for a while. He's established. He has friends. He has a favorite bar, etc. So to me, this one, yes, is in the same vein as Fenris and Isabela, where like we don't learn as much about them, but I feel like it would be like the third one after the other two, where we still get a little bit, but maybe it's not as much as some of the other stories.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And it is also a point of more proof of Varric's utter disdain for the Dwarven Merchant Guild.
Yes, absolutely. So let's kind of do a little wrap up of all of these. I know we've talked about there are some we really like. There are others we are not a super fan of. But if you had to give a rating to the whole, what would it be?
Like all
of these short stories from Dragon Age 2. If you were going to rate them all together, not individually, what would your rating be?
I'd probably give them a solid like 3.5 out of 5.
So I was agreeing, but I took the time out to kind of give each one a rating. So I said Anders would be 3, Aveline would be 5, Fenris 2, Isabela 3, Merrill 4, Sebastian 5, and Varric 4 for me, personal opinion. And then I did the math where I averaged that out. Well, it's a 3.7. So pretty close. Pretty close. So let's get into the Dragon Age Inquisition stories. Now, I don't want to spend a ton of time on these because we have done side characters on both Samson and Calpurnia before, where we have covered these significantly and taken a lot of time to do so. We talked about Calpurnia as a side character in season 5 on the Slavery in Thetis episode. And we talked about Samson in season 3 on our Red Lyrium episode. So you guys can go back and listen to those episodes if you want more information. But I will sum it up really pretty quickly. So in Paper and Steel, Samson becomes Corypheus's basic right-hand general. And it's all about his relationship with the Red Lyrium soldiers. And in the story, Samson does a lot of things. He wins a fight against a group of chevalier. He returns to camp and takes his broken sword to his friend Maddox to fix. There are tons of soldiers performing feats that should be impossible, like a small woman carrying several hundred pounds of plate armor without breaking a sweat. Samson thinks it's fearlessness rather than red lyrium changing them, however. There are other Red Templar soldiers like behemoths already separated from the rest of the army. He reflects on his lyrium addiction, and he also reflects on his culpability in Maddox being a tranquil. He used to help Maddox smuggle letters out of the circle, which when that was found out about is the reason why Maddox is tranquil. And so Samson feels a little bit of responsibility for that. And ultimately, this is a story about him reflecting on how the Chantry has wronged a lot of groups of people, himself included, with his own lyrium addiction, and kind of him fighting with Corypheus is his way to fight against the corruption of the Chantry. Even though we may agree this is not the way to do it, this is Samson's way that he feels like he is doing that. And so that's kind of the story. It's a really good deep dive into who Samson is. And it shows you really that Red Templars, people who are infected with red lyrium, they don't lose all of their identity. They don't lose, all of the kind of ability to think and have brain power, though they are clearly maybe not in 100% the right state of mind. So with all of that being said, what did you, and I completely forgot to say, this one is Paper and Steel, and it is written by Joanna Barry. So sorry, clarification on that one. So what did you think about this one, Austin?
Samson is really a sympathetic character who just makes a wrong choice. And I think that the things that are interesting is we get more about Samson and Maddox, who, if you do the quest with Samson, if you have the Templars and you have Cullen and you're fighting to figure out Samson, finding Maddox and learning the secret of Samson's armor is part of the way to get him to basically be spared and not have to kill him. So I like that call with the relationship with Maddox. I really was interested in Samson's reflection on the Chantry, and that similar to what we're going to talk about next with pairing the Ferryman, the way that Corypheus has deceived these two individuals is just they think they are both victims of being shackled by oppressors, and Corypheus has come in the form of a liberator, but is not one.
But in fact, they've been oppressed, but they haven't necessarily been enslaved. Well, Calpurnia has. But this serving under Corypheus is just another form of slavery, and neither of them recognize it. And it is heartbreaking. And I will also add, these stories are very long. Paying the Ferryman and Paper and Steel are very long. So just a heads up on that one.
I was just going to say, I would argue that these are more when you think of a short story, a traditional short story in literature, these follow that format versus the character ones are more little character snippets that we get. Some of them aren't even 2 pages.
Yeah, I agree. So let's move on to Paying the Ferryman, which is also written by Joanna Barry. All of the Dragon Age Inquisition ones are written by Joanna Barry. And this one's about Calpurnia. And so basically, this one's a little bit confusing because it does go between different times in her life. But she reminisces on witnessing a magical duel at the age of 7. That's kind of how it starts. She's standing in the same exact spot where it happens. And instead now of the scraggly kid, she's a fine woman wearing expensive clothes. She is also preparing to leave Minrathous at any time. And she purchases an incense that is going to be used as an offering for the Ferryman, which is a statue. And she thinks back on her childhood a lot in this one as a slave, where she was sold from house to house, never excelling, never making friends. Because she made her masters and her fellow slaves uneasy because she was powerful. And that's at least until Magister Erasthenes trains her as a mage. And that's when things change for her. He trains her, maybe doesn't treat her fully as like an apprentice, but treats her better than she would have expected as a slave. She also meets Marius, who is a current guard and future mage killer that we know from the comics. And they, of course, develop a relationship. And then at the end of this short story, I'm summing it up pretty quickly here, but Calpurnia eventually meets Corypheus. Erasthenes dies or becomes kind of trapped in a cage of magic by Corypheus. And all of that happens while Calpurnia becomes his right-hand mage.
This is probably my favorite of all the short stories.
Including the Veilguard ones.
Uh-huh. And I think just like the character of everything, I get so frustrated because I want to side with the Inquisition. In Inquisition, I want to side with the mages, but I like the characters you get to interact with. You side with the Templars so much more. Like, I love Calpurnia and Barris a lot more than I like Fiona and Samson. And like, it's not that I don't like Fiona. I loved Fiona in The Calling. One of my favorite characters in The Calling. Not up there in Inquisition for that. We've talked about that. But I love this whole thing. And I think this is a great example of, a hard truth that sometimes we who don't have the historical trauma of being an enslaved group of people think, oh, well, if they had a good master, like their life was okay. No, Calpurnia is always acutely aware that she is a slave.
Mm-hmm. Even when she has a quote unquote good master. He's not a good master because he still owns her, but he is miles above the rest because he doesn't beat her and torture her. That is how she thinks of it.
Mm-hmm. And that, she even remarks in this that, it's dangerous being a mage who's a slave because a lot of magisters use their mage slaves as parts of their blood magic ritual. And she just happened to luck out that Erasthenes isn't a blood mage. He doesn't really practice blood magic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, true. Absolutely true. Yeah, I highly, highly encourage this one. Encourage you to read this one. It gives you a lot of insight into her character. But let's move on to the very last one in the Inquisition bundle. And this one's called The Riddle of Truth by Joanna Barry. And it's about the Grand Game in Orlais. And it's written a lot differently than the other two. It doesn't have characters. It doesn't have an external. It does have a narrator, but it's not like a person that It's just a voice. And it's a little bit confusing to read because it's basically the narrator is discussing a series of riddles and puzzles that you might use during the Grand Game. And so it makes sense why they would include this one and have this one, since so much of Inquisition is using the Grand Game of Orlais. But it does make it a little bit confusing to read if you're not familiar with how the game works. So, what are your thoughts?
This is my least favorite of all of them. It's not that I think it's badly written or that it's not well done. I just don't care.
I mean, I know that you hate Orlais anyway, so that probably tracks. I would have loved to get more information about the Chevalier in this one, but I don't feel like we got that. But that's okay. We do get a lot of information about them in the game. So this is kind of the end of the Inquisition section. So I gave Paper and Steel a 4, Paying the Ferryman a 5, and then the Riddle of Truth a 2, which kind of evens out to a 3.6. So a little bit higher or a little bit lower than the Dragon Age ones.
I gave Samson a 4, Calpurnia a 5, and then I gave Riddle of Truth a 1 just because I didn't enjoy it or care. I probably deserves a 2 just because it is well written. But
I didn't enjoy it or care. Okay. I don't even know what to say to that.
Well, I think it also is like I was reading these like back to back, and I just finished Calpurnia's story, and then I moved on to this one, and I was like, this is almost shocking.
Okay.
But I mean, I
right.
think that's a testament to Joanna Barry's like writing style that she can have such a switch. That's amazing. I love that. So yeah, I'll give it
True.
a 2, and we'll have the same rating. I think I just
All
gave it
right,
a
same
1 because
ones.
I didn't want to have an exact same rating with you.
That's stupid, but okay. Okay. Well, I think now would be a great time to go to the mid-break, and then we can come back and talk about the Veilguard ones.
Pausa rapidinho agora para falar de dica de ouro para os papais e mamães. Depois de experimentar a nova Hug Supreme Care fralda roupinha, tudo ficou ainda melhor para o meu filho. É a única com canais em X que se adaptam aos movimentos, com 2 vezes proteção noturna e cintura elástica que se adapta ao corpinho do bebê, além de ser super fácil de colocar e tirar. Praticidade pura. Então guarda essa dica. Nova Hug Supreme Care fralda roupinha. Bebê, estamos juntos nessa, mais do que nunca. Agora curta seu podcast.
What is this? A new book? All this shit is weird. Oh, Varric, that is a terrible title. What are you even thinking?
That book you were reading this morning, Assyrian Spear. I don't think he had a spear in the legends.
He does in this one. Read the description.
Andraste knelt before no man but her maker. But she hadn't counted on the Archon Hessarian. Can Hessarian penetrate the tight-knit defenses of the warrior prophetess? Will she be prepared to face the full blast of his power? Wait a minute. Isabela, this is a vulgar thing.
You want to borrow it?
No!
You sure? It has pictures.
Not listening, I'm not listening.
Varric, does Hawk ever autograph books?
Why? Doesn't your copy of The Tale of the Champion have a big hole in it?
Yes, but it could also have Hawk's signature on it.
Welcome to the middle of the show where we talk about everything going on with the show, and we take time to thank our patrons. Thank you to all of our patrons. Welcome our new patron, CW Rogers. Thank you so much for signing up. Thank you to our first patrons, Lisa M and Genesis. You too can join the Patreon at patreon.com/DALorecast. Another great way to support us is to leave us ratings or reviews on Apple or Spotify. Let everyone know that you think this is a great show. And if you leave us a comment and 5 stars or 5 stars and a review, we will read it out on a future episode of the show. And so this comes from JP Bebbington, who says, delightful. Who doesn't love a bad boy detective story as ridiculous as this? Also, your discussion was hilarious. Though you may want to know that it's pronounced key, but spelled Quayy. It's pronounced key. Okay. Thank you so much for that. And that was on our Hard and High Town episode.
Listeners who often listen to the Assassin's Creed Lorecast and this show too, hear Austin mispronounce a lot of things very often. However, I have to say this mispronunciation was me, so Austin is getting a little bit of vindication here.
I wasn't going to say anything, but it's okay if you say something. You can leave us more reviews online, and we greatly appreciate that. Come hang out with us on Discord in the Cuts Podcasting and More Discord server. And then you can visit our website to also find our merch store and get some awesome merch. Most popular right now is a merch shirt with Solus's face all over it. And it says girl dinner.
Actually, if I'm looking at the sales, the most popular one right now is Varric's girl dinner shirt.
Yes,
just
there
saying.
is a Varric girl dinner shirt. If that's your jam, more power to you.
All right, I'm not going to dignify that with a comment. So let's get back into it.
The past years have been so busy.
We have earned at least a few moments of rest. A calm night out sounds... Oh, bravo! Bravo! Was the woman in gold playing a king? Who was the man in feathers? Oh, it's all very simple. The first actor's mask is determined by... well, I will lend you the program guide. But tell me, did you enjoy the performance? That was one of the greatest things I've ever seen. Truly. That part with the glittery, and they actually set fire to... Yes, I truly enjoyed it. Then I call tonight a great success.
I've got some of it written down now.
Give it here. Her breasts strained against a leather jerkin like two wild stallions corralled against their will. She pounced, the smooth moves of a jungle cat, and locked her thighs around Donnick's waist. He...
What? Nothing. What is that?
Shh. Isabela just thought she'd celebrate your love affair with a written dedication.
It's friend fiction. I do it out of love.
I will never, ever be clean again.
You fear barbarians will swoop down upon you.
Yes, swooping is bad.
All right, so let's get into the Veilguard ones. And there are quite a few, so buckle up. So the first one, published in 2022. Actually, I don't think these are in chronological order. So you'll just have to bear with us on that one. Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
But you can look up the publishing date. Like, it's not a big deal. So the first one is called As We Fly. It's written by Lukas Kristjanson, published in 2022. So this one is one of my absolute favorites. I love this one. And in it, Neri and Noah de Acutis, two elderly Antivan Crow assassins, lure the Qunari Cathrata the Lash and his band of Antom soldiers into a trap in Treviso. Treviso has been captured by a rogue Qunari military faction of the Antom, and the Crows are resisting this capture. So the twins travel through the city on rooftops, and they use a cable that is anchored to a portcullis to travel very quickly. Cathrata the Lash follows them, and they use the cables to trap him. While he's trapped, an explosion goes off in another part of the city. This explosion went off at the gate where the Antom were stationed. And so the leader of the garrison of this Antom, who is called Butcher Dathrata, calls all of the Antom soldiers back. And so Cathrata's men are kind of torn between, do we save him or do we disobey our higher commanding officer by staying here and not going back to help the rest of our troops? And the assassins, understandably so, bring this point up and are basically like, I mean, you guys can disobey the Butcher if you want, but that would be pretty stupid. And so all of these Antom soldiers, they go back to their fort, leaving him there to die. And that's kind of how it ends. But there's one more scene that I love where, like, the next day or maybe a couple days later, these two assassins, they're just like having coffee in the morning, and everyone is talking about this, and everyone is talking about how this happened, who did it. Like, they know the Crows did it, but like, which Crow did it? And they're just sipping, and because they're Crows, people are asking them, like, do you know who it was? Do you know who it was? And they're like, no, I have no idea. And I loved that. Especially, I just very, very, very much loved that these are like two old people. Just adored it completely.
I will tell you that reading this, I felt like I was reading a short story about an elderly Jacob and Evie Fry.
Yes, it's so Assassin's Creed coded. Like they travel across rooftops running from guards. Are you kidding me? That is so Assassin's Creed coded. I feel like the author wrote this while playing like I don't know, one of the games where you're in a city running across rooftops. And he just had it on the brain.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And like the Antivan Crows are an organization of assassins. Like they're very dexterous. Like this is what we know. I think I just love the like knowing sitting groups of tea being like, yeah, no, we don't know anything. Like you don't what? Someone died? You don't say. Like I think the one quote is like pity. I'd enjoy killing a few pretenders. Like, it's just really well written, and I love these characters, and I'd love to see them. I know that's a question later on, but I'd love to see them.
Yes, I desperately want to see both of them when we go to Antiva. But for now, let's move on to the next one, which is called The Flame Eternal. And just a disclaimer. I hope I'm pronouncing the author's name correctly, but I have no idea. If you are the author, if you know the author, if you know how to pronounce the author's name and I got it wrong, please let me know. But this one was written by Sylvia Feketekuty. And this one is all of you old man simps out there are going to be super happy because our companion from Veilguard, who is Emmerich and Manfred, they are two of the main characters in this short story. And I should say we found out on social media recently that it is Emmerich, not Emmerich. So just an FYI. So this story begins with a flashback to 922 Dragon, where Emmerich and Joanna Hezenkoss are trying to figure out why a skull is howling. They figure out that it is in a state of unrest because it was separated from the person that it was supposed to be buried next to. Emmerich makes sure that the skull will be buried next to the recently deceased wife, Mathilde. And that's kind of it. It very much demonstrates Emmerich's excellence at dealing with spirits and undead.
Yeah, I enjoyed this one again. Probably a solid 4 or something like that. I enjoy Emmerich. I hope that like he has that similar like personality that we see in this. I hope like the 30 years that are between this story and the Veilguard have not hardened him too much.
Yeah, I think it'll be fairly similar because the writers have talked a lot about how, or the developers, I should say, have talked a lot about how he is still very charismatic. He's a very charismatic character. So I feel like that will still be there. But I really liked this one. I felt like this one could be in the vein of Dragon Age 2 for Emmerich.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And we're coming up on this happens before Dragon Age Origins.
All right. So the next one is called Minrathous Shadows. And this one's written by Sheryl Chee. And this one is also one of my favorites. I really enjoyed this one. So a Templar named Tarquin sits at a table with a Tevinter Magister. They play cards and bet an exorbitant amount of money. Tarquin tells the Magister that they're hunting Venatori and has financial records from those Tevinters who participate in the black market slave trade. The Magister laughs and says, quote, "The Venatori were eradicated." She is very demeaning to Tarquin about the game and tries to pull one over on him, and then he counters her magic. She is stunned, like, how are you even able to do that? When she realizes that Tarquin has been working with the card dealer the whole time. And he responds, quote, "Rigging the system only works if we play by your rules," end quote. And then he goes on to say later, "We're the Tevinter you forgot. What do we want?" And then from behind the Magister, the dealer puts up his hood and says, quote, "Everything." So this is very much it paints a picture of vengeance to me, of like, we're coming for you. We're going to take down all of these corrupt magisters, which I am so about. It does make me wonder if this dealer and Tarquin are working with the shadow dragons.
Mm-hmm. I will be honest, I had to read this story like 3 times.
Why?
I just like every time I was reading it, I would get to I'm like, wait, what? What is happening? And so I had to slow down and read it a couple times. And I do think it leaves it ambiguous whether that they are the Tevinter that they forgot is the Venatori, or is it the Tevinter that they forgot, the people who oppose the Venatori?
I think that's a fair question. I assumed when I was reading this, to me, it feels like the little people, the regular people, the everyday people that were forgotten and left behind. But I think you absolutely can make an argument for the Venatori, though. I think the argument would be like, oh, you guys forgot about us, the Venatori, and so we're coming back with a vengeance. But for me, I taking it from the perspective of, no, these are regular everyday people trying to bring down corrupt magisters. So the comment about the Venatori implies that this particular magister was a member of the Venatori.
I would be curious where this story falls in the timeline of absolution, and perhaps Tasia. I wonder if she has started organizing Templars to be more like Orlesian or Ferelden Templars.
Yeah, possible. And we don't know where Tarquin's from. He could be from elsewhere in Thedas. I mean, I think his comment, we're the Tevinter you forgot, implies he is Tevinter, but maybe he also worked elsewhere in Thedas and learned the skills of Templars with lyrium. We don't know. It's ambiguous.
Right. Which I think is interesting because he counters her magic, which Tevinter Templars are not able to do because they do not use lyrium.
So let's move on a little bit to the next one, which is the name of this short story. And this one's written by Brianne Battye, I think is how you pronounce their name. But in this one, 2 Grey Wardens named Lawrence and Evka, they fight a beast that, quote, had 2 mouths, barbed teeth, and crusty drool. Gross. Anyway, Lawrence sacrifices himself in order to help Evka get out. He dies, but a spirit of perseverance comes to help her in the fight. And because Lawrence wanted to save just one more person. Evka then tells the spirit to tell Lawrence that she will rescue the next one, because that was Lawrence's motto, that, oh, you'll get the next one, or we'll get the next one. I thought this was a really cute story. It very much is a story of a Grey Warden, like mentor and mentee, but also has a lot of Gillenon vibes with the monster they're fighting.
It kind of gave me a little bit of Rhys and Aveline vibes a little bit too. Even though Rhys is a mage. Just because like there's a like note of like self-sacrifice in their story with Wynn as well. But I mean it is a cute story, but it's also very sad. I like that, but that's not all we hear from Evka.
It is not. So we can go ahead and skip to her second one, which is called Won't Know When. And this one's also written by Brianne Battye. And in this one, Grey Wardens Evka and another Grey Warden named Antoine, they kill an ogre, and they tested a new experiment of Antoine's on the ogre, which is basically like some kind of bomb concoction thing, similar to what Sarah uses in Inquisition. And so afterwards, they reminisce on other fights that they've had against Demon and Darkspawn, and they do know that more Darkspawn are coming soon. And so as a result of kind of this urgency and this short amount of downtime they have, Antoine asks Evka to marry him, and she says yes. And it's very sweet.
Again, like, I know this is a question for later, but also 2 people that I would like to see in Veilguard.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll talk about it later. So, do you have anything else to say about this particular short story, or do you want to move on to the next one?
We can move on.
Okay, so the next one is Ruins of Reality by John Dombrow. And this one we talked about in our episode where we did Strife as a side character. And that was it was in our last season. Yeah, so we did this one on the June episode. So if you want to learn more about this one super in depth, you can go check out that one. But basically, this one's very simple plot-wise. Strife and Ireland, who we've talked about extensively on the podcast, are in Arlathan Forest. Something is wrong. There's multiple versions of themselves. The timeline is weird, etc. Strife has a leather journal that is a relic of his clan, which is Clan Morlan, handed down over generations, but it started rewriting itself. And the journal describes a statue of Gillenon holding a crystalline Hala figurine, and the statue ends up being right in front of Strife. They take the figurine out of Gillenon's statue hands, and the spell on the forest is broken. Thoughts?
So just a couple. I love Strife. Always will love Strife. I am curious if this is something that like leads to the Veil Jumpers in a lot of ways. I know we have a lot of theories that Strife is working with the Veil Jumpers, but also I find it interesting knowing what we know now, especially after the Game Informer article about the fact that it's Gillenon in here, is interesting to me. I also find it interesting that it's time magic. And from what we know, when Alexius uses time. Yeah. Alexius uses time magic. He has to have like an anchor. Like I think Dorian talks about his amulet or whatever. And so obviously this crystal functions in a similar way. So I have two things of like, is this some forgotten elven magic that maybe Solus set up or whatever? Or is this experimentation that Alexius did in the Arlathan Forest that was just left over?
I think that's a good question. I'm not sure we have the answer, as always. But I agree. I think it's very suspicious that we have so much Gillenon. Yet again, we've talked about her in several stories, and we know she's throughout Deventer Nights. And so there's going to be some important stuff with her. So let's move on to the last one, which is I love this next one, but it's also very sad to me. So the next one is called The Wake by Mary Kirby. And in this one, as you can probably imagine, Viago attends Lucanus de Amorte's funeral/wake with Lucanus's cousin Ilario. Ilario, throughout the short story, tells tons and tons of stories about Lucanus. He's grieving. He's quite a mess. He very much talks about how they are more like brothers rather than cousins. Ultimately, Viago is there to take care of Ilario. And at the beginning, you're like, oh, like he's being so kind, like trying to take care of him. But then you realize take care of him has a little bit more of an ulterior motive. So Viago tries to get Ilario up the stairs and into bed. He finally does this. And at the end, Viago covers his nose and mouth with a cloth, knocking him out. And that's how it ends. So it's very ambiguous. Obviously, because of Dragon Age Veilguard, we know that Lucanus is not dead, unless he's some kind of lyrium ghost, which I would hope not. To me, this short story reads as the crows are trying to pretend he's dead so that they can use him to be more stealthy, to take more people down and have people not looking for him anymore. That's how it reads to me. Very reminiscent of the Clone Wars episode. This is a very niche reference. I know some people are going to love it, but it's very reminiscent of the Clone Wars episode where they pretend that Obi-Wan Kenobi has died and they don't tell Anakin that they're pretending, and they let Anakin think that he's really dead.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you. I just have one thing to say to you, which is that bald Obi-Wan isn't real. He can't hurt you.
Bald Obi-Wan Kenobi is my sleep paralysis demon, just to let everyone know.
I love this story just for the memes that have come out since then. The like scene with Yzma where it's like, a companion? He's supposed to be dead.
Yeah.
Which I just find hilarious because I love The Emperor's New Groove.
It's a great movie.
Yes.
All right. So let's get into our ratings of all of the Veilguard stories. Why don't you go first?
I gave As We Fly a 5. The Flame Eternal, I gave a 3.5. Minrathous Shadows, also a 5. I enjoy a good, like, gotcha playing, like, I know more than you, and you're the one. You think you're playing me, but I played you. I enjoy that kind of story. Next one, I agree with you in the 3.5. Ruins of Reality, also a 3. I love Wake, I'll give a 4, and then a 3 for What, No, When.
Yeah, so we do have pretty similar ratings. So for me, As We Fly was a number 5. The Flame Eternal was a 4. Minrathous Shadows was a 5. The next one was a 3.5. Ruins of Reality was a 3. The Wake was a 5. And then Won't Know When was a 3, which gave me about a 4, a little over 4 stars for this one.
Mm-hmm.
So before we kind of wrap it up, I do have a few discussion questions. And we've kind of talked about this one, but which of these short stories is your favorite and which one is your least favorite and why, of course?
Paying the Ferryman, the Calpurnia story, will always be my favorite. I love the story. I love Calpurnia as a character. I really like how it's set up. I love the deep dives into not only just like Calpurnia's mindset, but also like what it's like to be a slave in Tevinter. And then obviously all that. Least favorite is Riddle of Truth, which ironic that they're both by the same author. But I just did not enjoy that one.
I think I would have to say, and this might surprise you, but I think As We Fly is my favorite one. I love the Assassin's Creed vibes, but I also love the crows and just want to know more about Antiva. So I think that one's my favorite. And I do have to agree, The Riddle of Truth is my least favorite as well, just because I don't care about Orlais, as our listeners know. So, oh well. Okay, my next and final discussion question, unless you have any other thoughts, is which of these characters, especially in the Veilguard short stories, which of these characters would you like to see make an appearance in Dragon Age Veilguard? And so the ones, I kind of wrote out a list for us of the ones that were mentioned in all these stories. So we have Ireland, Evka, Antoine, Taya, Viago, Ilario, Joanna, Noah, Neri, the Butcher, the Kunari guy, Tarquin, and Strife.
Yeah, so the answer is all of them. I would love to see all of them from the Veilguard stories.
Well, that's no, you can't. That cannot be your answer. You have to narrow it down.
But the most, if I had to like rate like the top 3, I'm counting Strife and Ireland as one unit because I don't think that you can see one without the other. Okay,
fine. I'm editing my answer accordingly.
Okay. Evka is also on there. But probably top of the list for me, at least from this, is a close tie between the twins, Mary and Noah, and Tarquin. I've got to know what Tarquin's deal is.
So since you've just named everyone in the stories, I'll give you my
list. I did not name everyone.
Okay, I'm sorry. You didn't name Antoine. You didn't name Ilario. Like, you named literally 2/3 of them. But it's okay. I'm editing my answer accordingly. So the number 4 person I would want to see is the Butcher, because I'm terrified that the Butcher is Sten. And I really don't want to see that, but I would like to have confirmation one way or the other. The third person I would like to see is Tarquin. Number 2, obviously, if you've listened to this podcast for a long time, you should know I would love to see Taya. And number 1 is Noah and Neri, for sure. Adore the twins. And honorable mention would go to Strife because I love him so much, but I do feel like it's a pretty guarantee that we are going to see him And I think also guarantee we're going to see Taya and Viago and probably Ilario too. But yeah, so those are the short stories. Do you have any other final thoughts before we wrap it up?
No, I think we're ready to wrap it up. All right. Well, thank you for this, for organizing this. Thank you all for listening to the Dragon Age Lorecast. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to the Dragon Age Lorecast. You can find us on Twitter at DA Lorecast.
If you have any lore questions, topics to unpack, or side character suggestions, join our Cups Podcasting and More Discord server. It's easily the best place on the internet. You can also support us financially through our Patreon. You can find us there on patreon.com/DragonAgeLorecast.
The Dragon Age Lorecast is part of the Robots Radio Network. For more information about the Robots Radio Network, join the Discord server via the link in our episode description.
If you enjoyed the show or learned something new today, please subscribe, leave us a review, and join the Patreon. And if you enjoyed our intro and outro music, give a big thank you to Pipeman Studios. Thank you, Pipeman. Thanks again for listening to the Dragon Age Lorecast. We'll see you next time.
Have you ever wanted to deep dive into the lore and stories behind all your favorite Marvel movies? Then do we have the show for you? I'm Captain Shenko.
And I'm Psych88. Join us as we dissect the media megalith that is the MCU. We'll talk about the origin stories, the fights, and everything in between.
The MCU Lorecast releases on all major podcasting platforms on Mondays as part of the Robots Radio Rocket Club and can be found on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.